150 years. Time was passing swiftly by for them, and there was none of it to waste. The making of ceramics was developed to an art, as was the making of different types of glass. Looms were built to spin thread and cloth from wood's goat wool, and vegetable dyes were discovered. Exploration parties crossed the continent to the eastern and western seas, salty and lifeless seas that were bordered by immense deserts. No trees of any kind grew along their shores, and ships could not be built to cross them. Efforts were continued to develop an inorganic field of chemistry, with discouraging results. But in 159 the orange corn was successfully adapted to the elevation and climate of the caves. There was enough that year to feed the mockers all winter, supply next year's seeds, and leave enough that it could be ground and baked into bread for all to taste. It tasted strange, but good. It was, Schroeder thought, symbolic of a great forward step. It was the first time in generations that any of them had known any food but meat. The corn would make them less dependent upon hunting, and, of paramount importance, it was the type of food to which they would have to become accustomed in the future. They could not carry herds of woods goats and unicorns with them on Gurn battle cruisers. The lack of metals hindered them wherever they turned in their efforts to build even the simplest machines or weapons. Despite its dubious prospects, however, they made a rifle-like gun. The barrel of it was thick, of the hardest, toughest ceramic material they could produce. It was a cumbersome, heavy thing, firing with a flintlock action, and it could not be loaded with much powder lest the charge burst the barrel. The flintlock ignition was not instantaneous. The lightweight porcelain bullet had far less penetrating power than an arrow, and the thing boomed and belched out a cloud of smoke that would have shown the Gurns exactly where the shooter was located. It was an interesting curio, and the firing of it was something spectacular to behold, but it was a weapon apt to be much more dangerous to the man behind it than to the Gurn it was aimed at. Automatic crossbows were far better. Woods goats had been trapped and housed during the summers in shelters, where sprays of water maintained a temperature cool enough for them to survive. Only the young were kept when fall came, to be sheltered through the winter in one of the caves. Each new generation was subjected to more heat in the summer and more cold in the winter than the generation before it, and by the year 160 the woods goats were well on their way toward adaptation. The next year they trapped 2 unicorns, to begin the job of adapting and taming future generations of them. If they succeeded, they would have utilized the resources of Ragnarok to the limit, except for what should be their most valuable ally with which to fight the Gurns, the Prowlers. For 20 years, Prowlers had observed a truce wherein they would not go hunting for men if the men would stay away from their routes of travel. But it was a truce only, and there was no indication that it could ever evolve into friendship. 3 times in the past, half-grown prowlers had been captured and caged in the hope of taming them. Each time they had paced their cages, looking longingly into the distance, refusing to eat and defiant until they died. To prowlers, as to some men, freedom was more precious than life, and each time a prowler had been captured, the free ones had retaliated with a resurgence of savage attacks. There seemed no way that men and prowlers could ever meet on common ground. They were alien to one another, separated by the gulf of an origin on worlds 250 light-years apart. Their only common heritage was the will of each to battle. But in the spring of 161, for a little while one day, the gulf was bridged. End of Episode 9.